What advice do you have for Muslims wanting to study the religion more in depth?
Yeah. We talked about this before, I think, to some degree, but I think this is very important. There are, there's a movement, there's been some movements occurring. When Islam first came into America, it really came primarily through the Nation of Islam, okay? Now, people can discuss that and debate that and say, oh, well, we had these, as I mentioned in the previous video, these African slaves or Africans who were enslaved, or these pockets of these small groups. But even in the black community, those groups had no real social imprint. That's just a fact. I heard so many people simply say, older guys say, look, when Muhammad Ali won the title and said, I bear witness that there is no God but Allah and Muhammad is his messenger. That's when a lot of young brothers in the African American community in mass wanted to be Muslim. Think, occurrences like that. When they heard Malcolm, brother told me, he said, man, I was in prison in the 60s. And it reached us in prison that there was this guy named Malcolm who was just a heck of a teacher. And so that's just the reality. As more Muslims from overseas came, I think that's like after 65 with the passing of that act. I can't think of the name, the Immigration Act. Can't think of the complete name of it. But a lot of them still weren't publicly representing Islam, not like the black Muslims were. Then you have the transition of the Nation of Islam under Imam Muhammad. You do have other groups that are becoming more, like Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. He wasn't in the Nation of Islam. He was a black Muslim. So there are some other groups that come into existence. And then gradually more and more, there are more Muslim groups from other parts of the world that are present. I won't say visible and out front, but they were at least present. Because I still think up until September 11th, most Muslims from the immigrant community weren't openly like trying to promote themselves. They were sort of in the background. They were just sort of like in pockets, keeping to themselves. So they were present. You knew they were there, but they weren't in the forefront, like active in society, trying to change society. But that's changed with organizations like CARE and just even the way ISNA and ICNA operate now. They just operate differently. So, but what has happened alongside of that, the knowledge has become more diverse. So in the black community, I remember, and I mentioned this before, I remember growing up, it was like in Chicago, you were either in Imam Muhammad's community or Orthodox. That's what we used to call them, like a Salafi or something like that. We used to call them Orthodox. It's like these two, or you followed Minister Farrakhan. So you kind of had that. With the passing of time, that has changed. Knowledge has become more widespread. And now even you'll hear speakers in non-African American Muslim communities speak about the need to just become more diverse and understand the vastness of the tradition. So that's a problem that we have amongst Muslims. The need to be open-minded. I think a lot of Muslims are not, like I was just listening to Sheikh Yasser Qadi. He was giving a lecture on Shaykh Wali Allah, who is perhaps one of the most influential Muslims of the modern period globally when it comes to hadith sciences, etc. I had studied his books and studied his books on tafsir, his books on hadith, etc. So I'm aware of him, and we teach from his books in our institute. And he was making the point, this particular speaker that I referenced, he was making the point of how Shaykh Wali Allah had some opinions that today people say, oh, it's stuck for the law. Like he said, for example, the opinion that the notion that the moon split, that's one of the, in Islamic studies, that's considered one of the miracles of the Prophet, that he split the moon. Shaykh Wali Allah, his opinion was it was made to appear to the Quraysh like that, but it didn't actually happen as an actual phenomenon. Like me dropping a pin right now, actually, but it appeared as such. And he was making the point that people today, if someone were to give that same opinion, oh, stuck for the law, bid'ah, you're not a... But Shaykh Wali, no one said that about you. You had people who didn't agree, but Shaykh Wali Allah, his status is of such nature. And he's not the only one. Ibn Ashur from Tunisia, he had certain opinions about, like, he didn't believe Jesus. I think it was how he put it, if I'm not mistaken. The return of Jesus is not how... It may more so be his teachings, or it's not going to happen at all. You have some, like if people were to say this openly today, because Islamic knowledge has become so restricted, people just don't know anything anymore. The diversity of thought and opinion in the amongst the scholars, like these are the chiefs, we would be surprised. And he had a lot of other opinions too. But in any event, with all of that being said, I'm saying that to say, one of the greatest, I've heard this from the mouths of scholars that I studied with directly. One of the greatest challenges, one of the greatest problems for Muslims is that they don't read the Quran. They do not read the Quran. And the Quran, I've heard it talked about or referred to by teachers in Islam as a book that's almost otherworldly or inaccessible. And this is wrong. This is extremely wrong. There's a difference between an individual person writing a book of tafsir. There's a difference between that and a person simply reading the Quran for guidance. The Quran is a book of guidance, and it was put in the hands of our Prophet, and he communicated it to his following. And when you read the Quran, it's clear. It's clear. That it doesn't mean that every individual issue or point won't be opened up to you, will be opened up to you. But the Quran as a source of guidance, as a source of light for the life of the individual. But I would also say, if you're a philosopher, if you have philosophical inclinations, there's enough in the plain communication of the Quran for you. If you are a lover of the study of history, if you're a lover of science, if you're a lover of artistic beauty, any orientation in the mind that we can think of that's, characteristics of human beings, the Quran can feed that, let alone our ethical, our moral life, our family life, etc. So I'm giving a long, drawn out answer. To get straight to the point, for students of knowledge, I would say, read the Quran daily. Read the Quran daily. Study the Quran. Reflect upon the Quran. Digest the Quran. And as one teacher that I had, he said, is if you're going to be a student of knowledge, talib ilm, you really should memorize at least 5 juz, 5 sections of the Quran, at least, if you're going to be a student of knowledge. But at the basis, read the Quran every day. The second thing that I would do, that I advise, I would familiarize myself with the teachings of our Prophet, praise and peace be upon him. Don't get Sahih Bukhari and Sahih Muslim really unless you have a teacher. Those books require teachers. But a book like Riyadul Salihin, and even before that, the 40 Hadith by Imam al-Nawawi, the way it's composed, and we have scholars like Imam Abu Dawood say this, like the hadith that are in that book really form the fundamentals of the religion. Practically nothing that we run into, that we reflect upon, or that we engage in our day-to-day life, and that we need guidance for, practically nothing that we run into will be found outside of that book, that compilation. That's a very blessed compilation, the 40 Hadith. So study those, memorize those. It's also good to have a teacher for those books too. But you have a lot of free stuff now too online. And you even have some good commentaries on these things now. I would start with the 40 Hadith, and then by Imam al-Nawawi, the Riyadul Salihin, I would progress there. And Riyadul Salihin is really a book it's a Hadith book. It's a compilation of Hadith, but again, it deals with moral refinement. What's called akhlaq, character, and getting closer to Allah, moral refinement, ethics. So it's very easy to follow. It's not something that requires everything. Teachers are always good. I'm not knocking that at all. But one can pick up that book and navigate it fairly well and and become a saint. That's the real point. Like, what I mean by that is, you can, with the Quran and those books that I just referenced, one can become close to Allah in a real way, in a way that's closer than perhaps a scholar would. So that's very important to keep in mind. You know what I'm saying? And then, but beyond that, I think that people should take advantage of Islamic knowledge, teachers. One of the things that I notice, and I'll say this sort of in conclusion, one of the things that I notice with some of the senior students who've been studying for a decade or more, their presence online is very critical. You know, every time, that's why I really don't like to go online as much anymore, like Facebook, Instagram, but when they post, they're often just posting, students of knowledge shouldn't do this. People are on the internet claiming to know and they don't know. And I don't think that's very effective. Just get in the competition, man. Stop talking about, because you've studied some, how everyone is wrong and this. I don't like that. I think that they're really doing themselves a disservice, because basically they're talking to an echo chamber and people are, yeah, you're right, Sheikh. It's a lot of people. I mean, you got guys who perhaps haven't had a lot of study, but they have 1 million people, 1 million subscribers on YouTube. So you're just going to knock them, throw stones at them? No, man, help them. Reach out to them and say, hey, you know, you have a following. I think some things you said, it will benefit you. I would like to give you some help. Something like that. Hey, you have 500,000 followers on Instagram and you're putting things out there, and Allah has clearly blessed you with a certain ability. I would like to assist. Now, if they reject you, they reject you. Bismillah. I mean, you did what you can do. But I see that a lot. And I don't think that's any good, you know, because I think that we're Muslims. And we all can really work together, to be honest. Like, let's say, for example, let's say if I had 100,000 followers, subscribers, pardon me, but I had a group of advanced students of knowledge who could actually teach books and things like that. It would be good for me to use my platform to set up an institute to invite my listeners to join this institute to benefit from these guys. Some of those guys who are senior students, they're horrible teachers. They're horrible da'is. They can't get 100,000 or 1 million followers. So there's a way to work together. That's my point. We're all in this together. And I think that the shaitan, you know, he is the author of confusion, as the old Christians used to say, and he wants to see us weak. So let's not play into that. But I think beyond, again, a basic book of seerah, those books of hadith that I mentioned, reading the Quran, I would say for Muslims who want to grow in knowledge, to take advantage of the institutions. You have some online ones, you have some in-person ones. In-person is always better than online, but take advantage of what's available and take the gradual steps. And ask Allah, first and foremost, or most important, ask Allah to guide you, to guide your heart, to guide your mind, and to bless you with the proper teachers, the proper resources to grow. Because that's what we really want to see that. In our country, we want to see it in the world. We want to see a renaissance or a rebirth for Islam in the world.